Hey y'all, welcome back to Rad City Design Studio. I'm Mary and today we're making a stunning handcrafted copper and resin bracelet using UV resin, alcohol inks, and wire wrapping techniques. If you love DIY jewelry, resin crafts, and mixed media designs, you're in for a treat. So let's jump right in. First, we need to make 2 round bezels using 16 gauge bare copper wire. I'm using this wire specifically for a technique I'm going to use down the way, so just keep that in mind. I wrapped the wire around a plastic storage tube 2 times, ensuring that there was a slight overlap before I trimmed it at the connection points. To get a smooth, flush shape, I gently bent the wires back and forth until they sat neatly together. And then I used my nylon hammer to flatten them and make sure that they were going to be a secure base for our resin. I needed them to be nice and flat so that there wouldn't be any warping. Next, I placed both bezels onto a silicone pad and poured in a thin layer of UV resin to create a solid background. Now, be careful not to overfill because you're going to need to add more resin later on down the road. We're just making a nice little smooth surface to work with. I cured each piece for about 2 minutes from top and bottom to make sure that everything set really well. Once the resin was cured, I used some holographic nail chrome powder just to give it a first layer. This is really just going to kind of be like the background of everything else. So next, in a silicone palette that I have for watercolors, I diluted 2 shades of alcohol ink with some rubbing alcohol and used a detail brush to lightly dab the ink onto the resin in layers, allowing each layer to dry before adding more. This technique creates a really beautiful kind of marbled effect, and I love how it looks. To add even more depth, I applied some gold leaf and kind of like an organic flowing pattern, sort of mimicking like a geode or fluid art style, and these turned out absolutely stunning with all of their unique variations. Now, you could use this for anything. You could turn these into earrings or, whatever you might want. You could put them on a necklace, but I wanted to make a copper cuff out of this because I'm kind of obsessed with copper cuffs right now. So now that our bezels are ready, it's time to create that copper blank, so to speak. I grabbed about 2 feet of 16 gauge bare copper wire, the same wire I used for the bezels, and I bent it in half before threading the ends into a little handheld vise. Now, you could do this by holding the ends with like some pliers or something, but I found that my wrists are too weak for that. So I used this little hand vise, and the other side, I looped the bent wire or the bent half into the C-hook. So I had the C-hook fitted into my drill, and I slowly pressed the trigger on the drill and let the wire spin around, and that formed a perfect spiral. This creates like a rope effect. So I trimmed the copper rope down to roughly about 8 inches. Sometimes I can even get like 2 6-inch bracelets out of this, but I wanted a little bit of leeway here. So I trimmed this down to about 8 inches, ensuring that I had enough material to shape the bracelet. I had some 20 gauge copper wire, and I used some of that to wrap a few loops around the cuff about 1 inch or so from where the center was. And basically I'm creating a secure base for the bezel. So I formed 2 half circle loops on each side of the cuff, making sure that they were nice and secure. And then I hammered them flat so that when I add my bezel, it's going to sit nicely on the bracelet and not like try to lop one side or the other. To add a kind of like artistic touch, I carefully unwound about 1 inch of wire from each side and tightly wrapped one of the strands around the other to create a texture, to give it kind of like a finished end at the end of that side of the cuff. Now, I made sure that I snipped this wire as close as possible, and I even used like a sanding disc or something to drill it down or to to sand it down so that it'd be nice and flat with no scratchy ends. So to give it kind of like an aged rustic look, I soaked the bracelet in a liver of sulfur bath to oxidize that copper. And then after neutralizing that solution, I used a high grit sanding disc of about 1200 grit to buff the raised areas, and that brings out some really beautiful highlights and shadows. If you're interested in learning how to do this technique with the liver of sulfur bath, I can certainly make a video about that. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you'd like to see. So then once I kind of had that look that I wanted, I used a wooden mandrel, but you could use anything like a chair leg or a can or something, or anything round to get that nice curve. To secure the bezel, I placed it face down on a silicone pad, coated the back with thin layers of UV resin. I held the copper bracelet in place and used my light to cure it. And I did this multiple times, curing between each layer until the center rope and the loops around were fully embedded. This ensures a super strong bond and that the bracelet's not going to go anywhere. For a little extra flair, I wrapped 6 inches of 20 gauge wire around one side of the cuff, creating spirals and loops for balance and texture. And then I repeated this on the other side, then filed down any sharp edges for a more smoothed and polished finish. And here it is, the finished handcrafted copper and resin bracelet. It's lightweight but sturdy, and the best part is you can really customize this in lots of different colors, shapes, textures to create something truly unique. Wouldn't this look amazing as like a diamond-shaped resin cabochon? Let me know in the comments what shape you want to try first. So go make something awesome today, and as always, stay rad. If you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to check out my resin tutorial playlist for even more ideas.